Welcome everyone to a meeting of the Boston Region MPO Planning Organization. I'm David Muller, Representative Secretary filling here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostmpo.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Kurashi of the MPO staff at iqurashi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on the participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
Certainly. MassDOT seat 1.
This is David Mulder.
MassDOT seat 2.
Ligis Luto. Good morning.
Good morning. MassDOT Highway Division. John, are you able to speak? I'm not sure if it was me who missed it. Unmuted, but audio is not coming through. If you want to just say something in the chats, I will acknowledge it. Moving on to the MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnson representing the MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy. Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Good morning, this is Tyler Tarasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA. Present.
Hello, Tyler. Massport.
Hi, good morning. This is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
Good morning, Sarah. MAPC.
Hello, this is Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Hello, Eric. Acknowledging John Romano as being present as well. MBTA Advisory Board. I will come back. Hannah is just entering. The advice. Hello? I see. The Community Advisory Council.
Sorry for the delay. Caitlin Allen Conley, Community Advisory Council.
Good morning. City of Boston, seat 1.
Jen Rowe representing the City of Boston.
City of Boston, seat 2.
Patrick Hoey representing City of Boston.
Welcome, Patrick. At-large City of Everett. Then we have at-large City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis representing Mayor Mark Laredo in the City of Newton.
Good morning, David. At-large Town of Arlington.
Brett Diggins representing the town of Arlington.
Well then, at-large Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute representing Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent representing Mayor Jake Wilson. in the City of Somerville and the Inner Core Committee.
Morning, Tom. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Lexington.
Good morning, Megan Roach, representing Select Board Chair Joe Pato for the Magic Subregion.
Good morning, Megan. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Wynn.
So Darlene. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Good morning. This is John Strauss representing James Tiggis, Chairman of the Select Board of the Town of Burlington and the North Suburban Planning Council.
Good morning, John. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hall. But also at this moment recognize Hannah Switlikowski for the MBTA Advisory Board. And then Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson here representing Chairman Gallo for the Town of Rentham and the SWAP subregion.
Or Rachel. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Steve Olenoff representing the Trick subregion, Town of Norwood.
Steve. Is there anyone else during this time that would be like to be recognized? That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is Chair's Report. And I'd like to take a moment, if it's all right, to acknowledge a tragedy recently suffered by our friends at the City of Boston. Louisa Gagg, a planner with the city, was tragically struck by a truck while riding her bicycle last week and died of her injuries. She will be missed by all who knew her and also by the larger transportation planning by larger transportation planning, those of us who worked in planning, I'm so sorry. It was a tragedy, and on behalf of MassDOT, I'd like to express our sincerest condolences. And now I'd like to let our friends from the city speak if they'd like. Jen, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Apologies in advance. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard talking about how much Louisa meant to everyone who worked with her. And I know, like, just the way she was, she touched so many more, and I'm sure so many more people on the call than I'm even aware of. She was just like an absolute consummate professional, an incredible colleague, the sweetest friend. And I guess, yeah, I think just some of the things that came to mind when I thought about Louisa in particular with like the MPO was just I would always try to update all my colleagues about some of the things coming up on the agenda, and she was like one of those people who, I don't know how she had time for it, but would always like respond if there's anything at all that just was interesting, even if it wasn't her of course she had a focus on blue bikes and bike parking and but she was interested in everything that everyone was doing, and would always have some thoughts that hadn't occurred to me, and something really incredible to add. And I realized I had gotten into this like habit of often reaching out to her, or like neglecting to reach out to her very early about things if I needed to like a talking point or something about blue bikes, because she was just she was the type of person where like I think subconsciously I knew that she would get back to me and very quickly, because that's just like how she was. One of the most responsive people. And I think one of the other things that just when a lot of colleagues have, including many folks on this call, have been in various different gatherings, and one of the threads that keep coming up is just how much of a kind of can-do, dodged attitude she had about things. I know we all in this space, like there's a lot of challenges, and there's things that are that we know should be, or we think should be a certain way, and they're not. And there's a lot of stories and reasons behind those things. But like Louisa was the type of person who would like see something like that and be like, wait, why aren't there bike share stations on DCR properties? Why aren't there bike share stations on parks properties? Like that's that just doesn't make sense. And then she'd figure out a way to do it and make it happen. I will say with the DCR properties, I had attempted to and failed, and then she came up behind me and figured it out. And she just did it with just the most amount of didn't no finger pointing or blame or whatever. It was just we all kind of realized that this is the thing that should be, and let's figure out how to do it. And she was just incredibly graceful. And brought that to I think actually the grace was her middle name. And that was just the way she was. I know she'd recently been working a lot with folks on in the MPO around blue bikes, around electrification. I know she'd collaborated a lot of folks on our bike parking guidelines. So yeah, I know that certainly everyone in the city is mourning her and remembering her, but I know that she touched everyone in countless ways, seen and unseen. And then I think the other thing I just wanted to share is just how much we've all appreciated everyone who's reached it. There's just been so many folks who've reached out from this body and our larger professional networks from NACDO just to check in on us and how we're doing, and to show up at the vigils that have happened. And so there's folks outside the city who worked closely with her, who came to a meeting with her parents the other night, and it was just really not, just to see how much of a cross boundaries kind of person she was, and it was really reflective of that. And then I just in particular I know folks in Cambridge and Somerville reached out to help Kim. There was she was on the way to site some bike share stations that had to be moved on a quick timeline, and they've stepped in and done that work for us. And it just speaks, I think, to the community we have. And one of my colleagues said something like this is so impossible, and it feels so impossible, and yet the only thing that makes it possible is just the community, and a lot of that was the community she built around her, and y'all are a part of that. We've had food brought to us every day we've been back this week, and coffee, and from folks at the tea and NACTO, and I even lost track of all the everything, the flowers that have come in. We've had colleagues that used to be part of the city who've flown in from LA and New York and Cleveland, and so it's just been it's made her presence feel really strong, and certainly helped me in my own personal journey of grief. I also wanted to pass it to Pat as well.
Thanks, Jen. And thank you, David, for the acknowledgements. Very kind of you to bring this up and give us a moment just to share. And just, I guess, to echo all the things that Jen was saying. Louisa, she brought her kindness and her empathy to work with her professionalism, and she just exuded that, and she carried that with her, and she was just a joy to work with, and she impacted so many people. And you can see from the outpouring of love and everything that has been said about Louisa and her family and this community, but the graciousness that everyone has shown has really bolstered us, and everyone was really shooken up, of course, obviously, but the way that we've been able to lean on each other, and then everyone else externally, again, with their graciousness, has lifted us up and allowed us to continue to do what we do, and while at the same time that we're mourning and we're grieving. So we appreciate that, and it's really, really been helpful. So again, David, appreciate you giving us the opportunity just to share a little bit. And Jen, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very touching. And again, on behalf of MassDOT and the entire MPO, we are so sorry for your loss. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Tegan.
Thank you, David. And I just want to start off also by offering my condolences to you, Jen, and your colleagues, Jen and Pat and your colleagues, and the community in general for the loss of Louisa. as a body here that creates a vision for a safe transportation system, and as a body that stewards the spending of transportation dollars towards that vision, I realize that many of you are deeply impacted by this tragedy, and I would, in this context, also just like to restate my own commitment as the Executive Director of the MPO towards advancing the Regional Safety Action Plan that'll continue to contribute to a safer region, which is responsive to this board's commitment to zero fatalities and serious injuries on the region's roads. I do understand and know that that can't address, redress, or remedy anything about Luis's tragedy. I do hope that, like many of you, I plan to attend tonight's vigil, which is being organized by the Vision Zero Coalition, and it's an attempt to gather together to join in sort of a collective call for action. So we'll post a link to that if anybody's not aware yet, and I will look forward to seeing many of you there. So with that, respectfully, I would like to pivot to my usual report, where I'm going to cover an announcement, a few staffing updates, and as usual, sort of preview this agenda and future meeting dates. If you can go to the next slide, please. Oh, yeah, that's it. So we've been exploring the transportation boardroom availability for our annual meeting, which we typically hold in November. To date, we've only been able to opt to identify a single Thursday afternoon in November as an option. So I wanted to just sort of flag that date for people who are here. It's the available date looks to be the afternoon of Thursday, November 12th at 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon. We're still working on that. We're also currently working with the interim secretary's office to determine whether that's an option for him, and we will poll the board to be sure we can reach a quorum. So please look for that after I hear back from the secretary's office. We'll certainly follow up more, but I thought an early plug for that date might be useful for some of you. And in the meantime, I welcome any input and ideas from any of you as board members on the agenda for the meeting. And in fact, in the meantime, over the next month and a half, I'm arranging meetings with most board members just individually to ask you for your ideas and questions and update you on the business that will come to the board around that time. So next slide, please. I also have two more departures of MPO staff to announce today, with their last day actually aligning with Annette Dempster's last day on July 31st. So that will be certainly a big day for us as an agency. The first additional announcement is Zihao Jin, who is a senior data scientist who has worked on the travel model development team for 5 years. I wanted to mention him certainly while he hasn't presented at a board meeting, so many of you may not know him directly. I want to emphasize that he's been an essential part of the effort to reimagine and reform how we've been carrying out our travel demand modeling, as well as data visualization around that travel demand modeling. He has really single-handedly, as well as with the collaboration of his colleagues, developed compelling and accessible technical materials that have really sort of opened up some of the accessibility to some of this work and data, like a model utility platform, validation reports, and the model summary report. He's also helped expand the reputation and reach of the MPO by authoring 3 Transportation Research Board papers during that time. He was a founding member of the TDM visualization group. So in general, I just want to emphasize that he's not only been a wonderful colleague to his team, he's been part of the industry-leading transformation that this MPO has been recognized for over the past several years. So he will be missed. If you did. And then next slide, please. Second departure that I am announcing is that Olivia Sakosha, who's our UPWP program manager, who's been with the agency since January 2025, will also have her last day on July 31st. She stepped into her first UPWP cycle with a constrained timeframe and worked very hard with us, to the board members and all of the staff, to deliver a successful plan representing the work of our agency. She's worked really closely with the UPWP committee and more recently the Community Advisory Council, and you've seen her a number of times at the board to provide overviews and talk about development milestones across both UPWP cycles that she's been a part of. She's also worked closely with our Community Transportation Access Program Manager, Betsy Harvey Hertzfeld, on our language assistance plan to help make our work more accessible to a wider base in the Boston region. So in our next chapter, Olivia is going to be going abroad to the University College of London to pursue a master's degree in urban planning. And we'd just like to offer her, since I know a lot of you have talked with and worked with her, a chance to say a few words at the board meeting. Olivia, if you are able to unmute, you are able to say some farewells.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to briefly say that I really enjoyed my time at the MPO. There's folks, of course, on the board and my colleagues at MPO staff that have such a wealth of knowledge that this has been a really great learning opportunity for me, especially. And as a lot of you likely know, a significant portion of my job involves working with members of this board, and specifically those who were involved in the UPWP committee. So I just wanted to express that it's been a pleasure getting to know those folks and working with the committee over these past few UPWP cycles. Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Olivia.
just let me say, Olivia, it's been wonderful working with you. You've been great. And the board wishes you all the best in your next adventure. I mean, wow, going to London to study it. I'd take that gig over the MPO. Thanks, Olivia, very much.
Thank you.
I might as well, David, so we have a problem there. Well, please join me in congratulating Olivia. Thank you, Olivia, and best of luck on your studies. We still have her for a few more weeks, but this is the last time you'll be able to see her at a board meeting. So pivoting to the next slide, please. We have a new colleague that I'd like to announce and just have her briefly say hello. She started on June 29th, at the end of June. She joined us as Kaylee Spears, I should say her name, joined us as a data analyst on the project analysis and applications team. She has a master's in urban planning and a bachelor's in urban science planning and computer science, both from MIT. Prior to joining us, she worked as a student researcher in the MIT Media Lab City Science Group, where she analyzed how people access and experience urban amenities with a focus on equity and walkability. She also interned with the Nepal Institute, that's Nepal in case I wasn't clear enough, Institute for Urban and Regional Studies, where she quantified the local urban heat island effect and developed recommendations to help local officials to improve climate resilience. So I am very excited, given that experience and just her wonderful disposition as she started, to invite her to join us and introduce herself to you, as she will likely be presenting to you in the future. Kaylee, would you like to turn on your camera and mic and just say hello to the board?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tegan, for the introduction. And it's great to meet you all. Again, my name's Kaylee. I'm really excited to be joining the MPO as an analyst on the project analysis and applications team. Like Tegan said, my previous work has touched on a whole range of things from mobility modeling to community building in small towns. And so I'm really excited to be at a place to work on projects that touch all of these things through the lens of regional and local transportation planning. And so thank you so much for this opportunity. And again, it's wonderful to meet you all.
Thank you, Kaylee. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, the next slide, please. I have just a couple quick engagement updates. We have another announcement, essentially. We want to acknowledge a very exciting anniversary in our engagement work and the way it's evolved over the past several years. This month marks the 1-year anniversary of the formation of the Community Advisory Council. The council met last week. I joined them to talk about and reflect on the past year and plan for the year ahead. So you'll hear a report from them soon. But in addition to the advisory council work, we've been busy with July engagement events in Malden and Braintree. We've been talking with community members about active transportation, the Regional Safety Action Plan, Vision Zero, and public engagement practices. And just lastly, as a reminder, the public engagement plan's public review period is currently ongoing through August 6th, and you can submit public comments via our website, and we welcome those, please. Next slide. So just for today, it looks like a shorter list than usual, but there's still some very important items after our usual business. We will request an endorsement of TIP Amendment 7, which follows the conclusion of its public comment period. That was an amendment related to a scope reduction and cost decrease for the Linfield Rail Trail and a funding source change for a bridge preservation project. So Ethan will remind you of those details and ask if you are willing to endorse it. Then we will have TIP Amendment 8, which we will ask for you to release for a 21-day public comment period. This is for the 26 to 30 TIP as well, and it focuses on federal fiscal year 2026, including both the rebalancing of funds, not a cost change, but the rebalancing of funds for the Belmont Community Path first phase, and then also flexing previously awarded TIP design funds for the Lexington located long-range planning project to a funding source better aligned for the earlier project development work that's needed right now in the near term. Again, more to come to describe that. And then we'll talk with you a bit about the proposed process for identifying and selecting performance measures. These will be kind of newly introduced into our long-range planning process to help us monitor and track progress towards long-range goals and objectives. Next slide, please. So our next meeting will be on the 20th of August. So that's a little more than a month from now. Note that the August 6th meeting right now is canceled. And at that August 20th meeting, we canceled because we didn't have agenda items that warranted having the two separate meetings. But on August 20th, we'll have some very important items. We'll ask you to endorse the final public engagement plan after the public comment period. We will also likely talk with you a bit about some of our work that's been carried out by our policy analyst. And also we will have a kind of a presentation discussion to engage some participation in the federal certification review that was introduced to the board a little while back. This will be a bit of a conversation with the board. So with that, I can turn it back to you, David, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tegan, any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the public comment period. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? Seeing and hearing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next up is committee chairs reports. Are there any? No. Okay. Community Advisory Council report. Caitlin?
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to join you and the entire group in remembering Louisa and recognizing just this tragic event. I think everyone at Transit Matters and in the transportation community is really heartbroken by this loss. She was really a brilliant colleague and a dedicated public servant and a fierce champion for safer streets. As Tegan mentioned, there was a vigil tonight at City Hall Plaza. I think the gathering starts at 5:30 to honor her memory and to call for immediate action to address what we think is a systemic failure that resulted in her loss, and hopefully a recommitment to Vision Zero and zero fatalities. So thank you, Jen, for the wonderful words that you spoke, and to others about Louisa. The Community Advisory Council met, as Tegan mentioned, on July 13th. This is the anniversary, first year anniversary of the council. So we met and discussed the first year of the council, and we brainstormed ways to better engage with the MPO over the coming year. The council and MPO staff also sort of talk through upcoming pathways for the council to plug in into more regional planning initiatives. And as always, we heard from updates from members, a select member, one or two members this last time on their respective organizations. We are planning a fun outing this summer for the group. I believe it's going to be a walking tour at the future spot for the Spot Fund Brook Greenway, and then we'll have a social aspect to it in the end. More details to come on that. And then I would just like to also announce that I will, for personal reasons, be stepping down from my position as executive director at Transit Matters at the end of September. Similarly to Olivia, actually, I am relocating to London, not for school, but to relocate with my partner. So as a result, Transit Matters will be stepping down as chair of the council, but we are fully committed to remaining a member and supporting the council going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. And interesting news, and I can't go unremarked. We will miss you both at the MPO and as the executive director of Transit Matters, and wish you all the best in your next adventure in London. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of June 4th. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes without, please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Thank you. Eric Barassa, MAPC. I make a motion to approve the June 4th meeting minutes.
Thank you. Tom Ben.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing and hearing none, please call the roll.
Certainly. David Moeller.
Yes.
Liris Lieto.
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Ms. Wilikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly,
Caitlin Allen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge, John, we could hear you, I could hear you loud and clear, and acknowledge the vote. Thank you for the chat message. And David Kozis,
David Kosis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bett,
Tom Benton, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Steve Volanoff.
Steve Holenoff, yes.
Is there anyone I have not called? With that, the motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is approval of amendment number 7 to the federal fiscal year 2026 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program. Ethan LaPointe.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I'm a senior transportation planner on MPO staff. This first action item here is a presentation of Amendment 7 to the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 TIP. If we can go on to the next slide and the one after this slide, please. Just provide a brief reminder of the contents of Amendment 7. This amendment includes 2 projects, both for federal fiscal year 2026 programs, one for a regional target project, that being a scope reduction and according cost reduction for the Linfield Rail Trail, and the other a statewide highway program project, that one being a bridge preservation project, which was proposed for removal from the fiscal 26 program, as it is now utilizing state funding rather than federal funds and does not need to be included in the TIP any longer. That project is still moving forward on the same schedule. With that, given Amendment 7 was a TIP amendment, if we can go on to the next slide, please. It did have a 21-day public comment period, which began on June 22nd and concluded July 13th. Staff received no public comments related to this amendment during that time. If we can go on to the next slide, staff are requesting that the board votes to endorse Amendment 7.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to endorse this TIP amendment as presented today? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa with MAPC, and I make a motion to approve this TIP amendment.
Oh, sorry, Eric. Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, City of Boston. I'll second Eric's motion.
Motion having been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Lyris Vieto,
Lyris Vieto, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Wilikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly,
Caitlin Allen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kosis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bett,
Tom Benton, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Steve Olenoff,
Steve Olenoff, yes.
motion carries, Mr. Chair.
David. Next item on the agenda is Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 8 to the 2026-2030 Transportation Improvement Program. Ethan LaPointe.
Right, thank you. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Given this is Amendment 8 to the federal fiscal year 2026 to 30 TIP, we are introducing this amendment before the board here today, where at the end of this presentation, staff will be requesting a vote to release this amendment for public comment. Similar to Amendment 7, there are 2 changes proposed for this amendment. However, both of these changes fall within the federal fiscal year's 2026 Regional Target Program. I'll go through each of them in turn, but just to provide some information up front. The first is a change in funding source, scope, and cost for early planning activities along Route 4225 Bedford Road, I think, in Lexington, which is listed in the MPO's long-range transportation plan. And the second is a rebalancing of advanced construction funding for Phase 1 of the Belmont Community Path, specifically referring to the project's funding being distributed currently across federal fiscal years 2026 and 2027. If we can go on to the next slide to speak a little bit more about what I mean by some rebalancing of funding. As we are now in the middle of July in federal fiscal year 2026, staff have been reviewing programmed funding in our federal fiscal year 2026 regional target program. So the Boston region had available for selection of projects in federal fiscal year 2026 about $125.29 million to select projects. And as of today, about $121.55 million has been programmed against that original target value. This leaves an anticipated unprogrammed balance of about $3.74 million. As a result of the amendment that is being brought before the board here today, that balance would be reduced from $3.74 million to about $90,000, specifically, again, discussing that rebalancing of funding for the Belmont Community Path project. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll speak about first the Lexington Planning Improvements project. So this project was originally listed, or I should say is currently listed in the TIP, as the Lexington Design of Safety Improvements at the Interstate 95 and Route 4225 interchange. Based on coordination that has taken place over the last year between the town of Lexington, our partners at MassDOT Highway Division and Office of Transportation Planning, and among MPO staff, this project, which was voted for inclusion by the MPO board into the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP originally, is more aligned with planning efforts than it is for a full-scale design effort for a project. As a result, this amendment is proposing a scope change for the project to classify it now as the planning of improvements to Bedford Street, which remains consistent with the project's inclusion in the MPO's long-range transportation plan, along with a source change, shifting the project's funding source from what is currently listed as a capital funding source line item, specifically the National Highway Performance Program, instead to a flexed funding source for metropolitan planning funds or metropolitan PL dollars. Given this is now more aligned with a planning project, there is a new proposed budget of $1 million for this project, down from $1.65 million. I will note $800,000 of that is federal funding, and the town of Lexington will be providing the $200,000 of match for this project as well. Moreover, as part of the scope change for this project, besides being a planning study, this project is now more aligned with a full review of needs along the entirety of the Bedford Street corridor in Lexington, instead of focusing solely on the Interstate 95 and Route 4225 interchange, again, in a manner that is still consistent with the project listing in the long-range transportation plan. On the next slide, we then have a proposed change for the Belmont Community Path project. So this project, as some board members may recall, saw a cost increase during development of the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 TIP. The project is currently listed in the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 TIP at $30 million for its federal fiscal year 2026 budget. The cost increase that was witnessed when we were developing the TIP this past spring was not necessarily reflected in the federal fiscal years 26-30 TIP, and this amendment is not going to fully reflect that. However, We are proposing, based on that unprogrammed balance that I mentioned earlier, about $3.7 million, plus that cost decrease for the Lexington project, an increase of federal fiscal year 2026 funds for this project of about $4.3 million. I'll note that the Belmont Community Path's current estimated project cost is at about $48.93 million. So this amendment, when it proposes shifting funds here, will functionally also propose a future amendment to the 2027 to 31 tip when that takes effect to move $4.3 million of funding out of that year and back up into this year. So this amendment does not propose any changes to the scope of work or the overall project cost for the Belmont Community Path. It is a reallocation of funding between different federal fiscal years, and we will likely come back to the MPO board sometime this fall for a future amendment to the 2731 tip to mirror it in that document. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide. I'll also note as well, similar to what I mentioned at the start about federal fiscal year 2026 unprogrammed balances, when the board voted to endorse the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 tip for federal fiscal year 2027, the program of projects for fiscal 2027 had an unprogrammed balance of about $3.8 million. Should the Belmont Community Path project funding be rebalanced, and assuming no other changes to any project estimated project costs for the next few months, as of the next tip taking effect and following an amendment to reflect the sort of AC rebalance, the new projected unprogrammed balance for fiscal 27 projects will increase from about $3.8 million to about $8.1 million. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide. Staff are requesting the board votes to release Amendment 8 for a 21-day public comment period based on MPO policies around a minimum 21-day public comment period for tip amendments. This comment period will begin on July 20th and conclude on August 17th at 5 p.m. I'm happy to take any questions here.
Questions for Ethan? All right, Ethan, I got a couple. First one, so July 20th to August 17th, isn't that more than 21 days?
We may have shuffled some days around. Let me check that real quick.
Right, there's 31 days in July, so there's 11 days in July plus 17 days in August. That's like 28 days, right?
Yes, it may be more like August 11th then. Or,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
August
I mean,
10th.
we're still going to vote on it in the later meeting in August, but it just struck me that I don't think that's 21 days. Can you go to the first slide, not the slide the first slide about the amendment? That one. Nope, that one. So the notes only talk about $300,000, but we're actually doing $1 million. Can you just explain to me? I'm 100% supportive of this. I think it's a great idea. What's the funding? How's the funding add up to $1 million?
I should clarify that this is actually an error on this slide.
Okay.
The table that is listed for this amendment on the MPO meeting calendar does note the full $1 million.
Okay,
So
then
apologies
you
for
don't have
that
to go
error.
through it then. That's fine. And then I have one other question, Ethan, on, oh no, not a question, just a statement of, as we're thinking about the $8 million we freed up in 26, I want to remind people that MassDOT is fully supportive of trying to flex additional money to the Metro West RTA at some point in the future to fill their funding gap that we inadvertently left them with. Taken?
Thanks, David. Yeah, per Ethan's comment there in response to your question, we did double check. Sorry, Ethan, I noticed while you were talking, the posted materials are updated. It just didn't get updated in our presentation. So if you're looking at the posted materials, that is accurate for the Lexington work. So if you do have any more questions, David, about the scoping and everything, Rebecca Morgan is
No,
a good
I'm
contact.
good.
Okay, all right, great.
If I'd have taken the time to read the posted materials, I wouldn't have asked my question. So
No, it's fine.
Nobody's
Yeah.
fault but mine.
That's fine. No, it's fine.
All
I wanted just the board members to know that they can refer to the posted materials.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can we get a motion in a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, MAPC, I'll make a motion to release this.
Thank
tip
you, Tom
amendment.
Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
Luis Leoto,
Luis Leoto, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly,
Caitlin Ellen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Ho, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kosis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Thank you, everyone. And this motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is the Long Range Transportation Plan Performance Measures. Richard Bard.
I am actually going to get us kicked off today, Mr. Chair, if that is all right with you.
Of course.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's good to be here. I am here joined by my colleague, Richard Barad. My name is Erin McGuire. I'm a transportation planner leading the development of the Boston Region MPO's Long Range Transportation Plan. Richard is our manager of our performance-based planning and programming. If we could head on to the next slide, please. We are here today to update you on the process that MPO staff recommend undertaking to establish some long-range metrics to monitor throughout our many long-term, long-range planning deliberations. This is our first time coming to you as a board for this topic, so we wanted to start out with some high-level goals for the process, along with some general context that we think might be helpful. So the first and most direct goal of this initiative is to establish an approach to monitoring MPO and regional progress towards the goals that are identified in our Long-Range Transportation Plan, or LRTP. Another goal here is to select and prioritize some high-level measures that the MPO thinks are best fit to communicate the intended outcomes of both the MPO's work and its investments. And finally, we want to draw an explicit through line that is clearly visible between our long-range plan, our performance-based planning and programming, the way that we evaluate projects in our transportation improvement program, along with many other components of the MPO's ongoing work. Next slide. Next slide, please. When thinking about long-term performance measures, we want to set up a process that results in trackable, reliable data that can be re-examined over time, particularly in 5-year increments, to evaluate the progress towards our goals. The performance measures are intended to help clarify what success in a goal area or a specific objective looks like to the MPO. These performance measures are intended to be complementary to what already exists as our performance measures, either coming from federal requirements or have been set up through some of our individual specific programmatic work. And overall, we estimate that this process will result in about 3 to 5 metrics per goal area. Next slide. And before going into further detail, I wanted to give some examples of what other MPOs have done with this topic. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission has established 22 performance measures to help monitor regional progress. Many of these measures have been set up to help communicate progress for more than one topic area. So for instance, when talking about commute modes, they also consider how it relates to sustainability, the environment, the community, and transportation at large. Next slide. Similarly, Rhode Island's long-term plan monitors regional federal performance measures in addition to some measures that were set up to help with some of their regional decisions. These measures were then integrated into their final long-range plan by specific goal areas. Next slide. Back in May, I had talked to you guys as a board about the vision and goals that were established in our long-range transportation plan. In that conversation, I had asked you all for some feedback on initial goal areas that you would like us to prioritize when establishing these long-term performance measures. From this, we had done a Mentimeter activity, and the two main goal areas that were selected were access and connectivity and safety. So as a result, we've been developing this pilot around those two specific perspectives. I do want to note that one notable comment that we did receive urged us to consider the impact of all of our work on communities in general, and we just want to acknowledge that that was heard and we are integrating it into the process. At this point, I'm going to hand things off to Richard to talk you guys through some of the details.
Thank you, Erin. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, as Erin mentioned, my name is Richard Barad, and I joined the MPO about a little over 3 months ago, and it's great to have an opportunity to present to this board. I manage the performance-based planning and programming program, but as part of my role, am also supporting the process of identifying metrics for the LRTP. Next slide, please. So today I'd like to discuss the process that the MPO staff are proposing to use to identify and select metrics to report on in the LRTP. Here we see the three main proposed types of criteria the MPO staff propose using to help select metrics to report on. And these are first, building on the existing MPO knowledge base and program work. So this includes both our federally required PBP metrics, but also metrics that are being monitored through specific programmatic work. The metrics should also help quantifiably monitor and track progress towards our regional long-term plan goals and objectives. And it is also important that we leverage data sources that are both reliable and consistently available over time and at a consistent level of quality and transparency. This is particularly important because of the need to create time series and make comparisons over time. So it's important that the methods in the data be consistent over time. In the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about each of these three types of criteria for selecting metrics in a bit more detail. Next slide, Ibu. So looking at the relationship to the existing MPO knowledge base, where possible, we want to leverage existing work and build on it and share that existing work in the LRTP. So the existing places that we're looking at metrics include our federally required metrics, program-specific metrics. So this could include metrics from the Vision Zero plan, as well as the congestion management process, and also other programmatic specific work that the MBO is undertaking. We're also looking at the relationship to the Transportation Improvement Program and Long-Range Transportation Plan project evaluation criteria to ensure that these metrics relate back to the framework we are using to select projects for funding. Next slide, please. So looking at the LRTP objectives, this is an illustrative example focused on safety. Our goal under safety is to achieve zero transportation-related fatalities and serious injuries and improve safety for all users of the transportation system. Under that, we have three objectives focused on prioritizing investments that target vulnerable roadway users and disadvantaged communities, and also reducing fatalities and injuries among those populations. So when looking at the metrics, that we were selecting, we wanted to try to ensure that we have metrics that specifically focus on these specific safety objectives and track progress towards them. Next slide, please. Looking at the data piece, data availability and consistency over time, and quality and transparency, there's a couple things that we're eager to look at. First is the data regularly updated? Since we aim to form a time series over time, it'll be important to use data that's regularly updated, and we can update the number in line with when our LRTP is updated every few years. Also important to have a consistent method for gathering data to look at comparisons across time and space, and also ensure that the data is used in the metric is transparent and a reliable source that we feel the MPO staff and board can stand behind in a public long-range transportation document. Lastly, we also want to look at how easy it is to calculate the metric. We've been collaborating on this aspect closely with our data program, who's been able to provide a lot of useful input. But a big goal will be to try to automate these calculations and metric work as much as possible so that we can easily update the metrics on a fixed cycle in line with the LRTP update process. Next slide, please. So this slide shows an example of how we would score a metric. Here we're looking at the number of fatal crashes, so one of the safety metrics that we explored examining. And we can see under the three categories, there's different criteria that we're examining in terms of the metric's relationship to existing MPO work. So with this metric, it is a metric that is very closely monitored through our performance-based planning program as well as Vision Zero. So it's very related to the MPO work. It's also quite related to the LRTP objectives. And then the data is updated regularly over time. The MathDOT's impact data would be the data source. So it scores quite highly on all the different categories. Next slide, please. So here we see an illustrative example of some safety metrics that we have explored potentially incorporating into the LRTP. I want to stress that this is not an exhaustive list of all the metrics we considered, and it's the metrics we're showing are not necessarily the final metrics that will be proposed. Here we're sort of trying to provide the board with an overview of the process, and then we'll be coming back to the board with a final proposed list of metrics later on, most likely in the fall. But you can start to see our initial scoring of some of these metrics that were considered. We can see that quite a bit of variability in the scores from 9 to 13. One thing we also want to stress is that we are not necessarily just taking the metrics with the highest scores. While the score is a helpful guide, we also want to use a holistic approach and ensure that we have at least one metric that speaks to each of the LRTP goals and objectives. And we also want to ensure that the metrics we're selecting are not duplicative. So ensuring that we're not sort of looking at selecting metrics that might just show the same overall pattern and trend. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how we might pull out metrics to focus on. The first metric that pulled out is the number of fatality and serious injury crashes. But then you also see that we have metrics that try to get at those specific safety objectives. So looking at vulnerable road users, and also looking at crashes in areas that are communities of concern. Look to get at the goal of objective of focusing on disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. We also, to try to look at MPO investment, have metrics that are looking at MPO projects within the HIN. So are we successfully setting up projects in these areas that have a high risk of fatalities and injuries? And is there a safety component integrated into those projects? So this is, again, an illustrated example. We've done this work for safety, and we're aiming to try to finalize the selected safety metrics over the next few weeks, and then replicate this process for access and connectivity. But before we move forward, we wanted to take this opportunity to open it up to the board for questions or comments or thoughts on this process. Next slide, please. And we're open to all types of questions or comments or requests for clarification, but two specific areas that we thought would be useful to get the board's input on is whether you have any feedback on the process I just presented, Aaron and I, that's used to select and identify the metrics. And also just hearing if there's any quantitative safety or access and connectivity metrics that the board is potentially interested in us considering as part of this universe of metrics that we're looking at as we narrow down to the actual 3 to 5 metrics to monitor per goal area in the LRTP. Initially, we'll focus on these two. Based on progress, we'll likely then reevaluate looking at additional goal areas within the current LRTP process. So back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Eric Barassa.
Richard, thank you for that overview. For number 2 here, are there any quantitative safety or access or connectivity metrics? For access metrics, I know the MPO has done a body of work looking at access to destinations and sort of the disparity across the region. I think that's part of some of our equity work. And I know that there are some that have certain flags associated with them, like access to open space, access to, I'm trying to remember a few of them. And I'm wondering, would that be something to focus on as part of this, or would we keep that as part of that other body of work? Or would that be a subset of sort of like equity access metrics?
Yeah,
I know you guys are trying to keep it, to just like a few things that we can kind of focus, and we can go, really broad when we do this stuff.
Yeah, happy to take that question. So the answer is yes, we're considering that work. I believe that the destination access dashboard that you're referencing that.
Yes, that is. Yes.
Okay. Yes, we are considering that work, and essentially the metrics from that work are being considered as part of the access and connectivity universe. We'll probably need to narrow down to a smaller set. We have had some discussions that access and connectivity may be a little trickier to narrow down because it's a much broader area in terms of what we're trying to accomplish there. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting discussions there once we start that narrowing down process. But those metrics are definitely under consideration.
Thank you.
Steve Olino.
Yes, so where is what is the high injury network? Where is that defined? What is it?
So that is something that came out of our Vision Zero work, and if there's colleagues that are more involved in that work on the call, they're welcome to speak to it. But it's a network of areas that had high fatality and serious injuries.
But wouldn't that change over time, and therefore violate the idea that you don't want you want data to be consistent. If it's on a based on a base that's changing, then that doesn't make it consistent. And why isn't it just done for the entire area?
Richard, do you want Rebecca to talk about what the network is before you try to answer the second question?
Sure.
Because Rebecca's got her hand up. Rebecca?
Thank you, David. Yeah, Stephen, the high injury network is something that we developed as part of the Regional Vision Zero work that was done over the last 18 months.
comes from NPR stations. Other contributors.
Where we looked at fatal we looked at fatal crashes and serious injury crashes, and from that data that MassDOT created through the Impact Portal created a high injury network for the Boston region. So we looked at all 97 cities and towns and did a data-driven approach to identify where are the highest risk locations across the region, where are we seeing the most likely places where there'll be crashes that will result in fatalities and serious injuries. And those have been identified based on the latest data, and we plan to update that as data gets refreshed. We'll continue to assess that and as problems are solved, right? So if there's a high injury network corridor and there's a safety project where we implement safety measures, we want to see, is that making an improvement? And if it is, then our high injury network would be updated. So there's plans in the long term to keep that updated, but it is based on the latest data.
Did that answer your question?
No, I would think that if you're talking about a specific area, looking at different roadways and different towns, which would change over time. So then how do you compare data and track data over a period of time?
Yeah, so I think, and we still definitely need to have more discussions around this, but I think in terms of the metric work, we would use the high injury network identified at a specific point in time. So the baseline one that was set up as part of the initial Vision Zero work. So then we can look at that network and say, are fatalities decreasing within these areas that we know previously were high risk, and hopefully we see a trend of decrease over time in these specific hotspots. But it's definitely still up to discussion, and sort of if it is a selected metric, we'll be talking very closely with our data team and to sort of iron out exactly how we would account for that and what we would be presenting.
Yeah, I think there definitely needs to be more work on that, thinking about that, because yes, you can look at the individual areas, but most important is the overall statistics, which should be over the entire metropolitan region.
Yes, so we would still have statistics for the entire region. The goal here was to sort of have a sub-statistic that is looking at the highest risk hotspots. But definitely still up to discussion, and we'll be talking more about it internally and also come back to the board with a final list of metrics, and be sure to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
General.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just wanted to, I guess maybe 2 points. One, just to the recent conversation about the high injury network, just acknowledging like the enormous amount of work that went into building that out, having worked on Boston's previously, and also like that. Yeah, it is like kind of a complex thing of like how frequently do you update this, and I know we've been back and forth about different frequencies, because in some senses you want a snapshot and then to be able to like focus your effort on what that is showing you in time. Like we all know these projects take years to pull off, and so you like updating it every single year is kind of like can kind of dilute the focus that you might have on what the given like iteration is showing, and yet also we do want to be seeing things as they change over time, and I know I just want to thank staff. I know we're in conversations with you all about like some of the Boston data, and like in realization that some of our the ways that some of the data has been collected that is then provided by Boston, that's then provided to the state is, using a different vendor, and there's complications, and it's not the best. So anyway, all of this is evolving, and just want to thank staff for working with us to make sure that the crashes that happen in Boston are properly represented there. And then I did want to just kind of back to Eric's question earlier, not to preempt the interesting conversations that I'm sure we'll have about access and connectivity metrics. I did just want to flag that that we wanting to think very critically about how we think about travel time metrics. And maybe I'm conflating things, but I know that some of the metrics that showed up as having maybe disproportionate burdens were like travel time metrics for vehicles accessing parks or and other destinations, and there is like a real tension between like the need to wanting to reduce travel time, but also like certain modes reducing travel time may also mean like being in direct conflict with increasing safety, right? So like thinking about really critically about what modes we're measuring for which metrics and how to kind of hold those all in a balance.
Thanks, Jim. Lynn Diggins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A request and a question. The request is, could you send this deck out as soon as possible? Otherwise, I'll just ask a bunch of of useless questions. So I'd appreciate that. I'm just one of the kind of people that has a hard time taking in information in real time like this, so I often have to read and reread, preliminary documents. So the other question is, do you think there would be any value to back testing whatever we come up with, against previous LRTPs, or do you think that'd just be an academic exercise that would have little value, little usefulness?
So
I'll
just
jump
to
in
make
here,
sure
Richard, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the biggest limiting factor that we would have here is just getting access to the data and then narrowing down whatever focus you as a board would be interested in us sort of doing that backwards looking perspective on. One of the sort of biggest challenges that we've experienced with coming up with performance measures in general, especially relating to our entire long range plan, is coming down to prioritizing items over one another and making those initial selections. So some direction would definitely be helpful there.
All right. That's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
John Strauss.
Thanks, Dave. I just had a quick comment on the high injury network. We have in Burlington a project to redevelop the Middlesex Turnpike. We use the high injury network diagram or web page from the MPO to identify some of the issues. And as we expressed these to the consultants, they were aware of it as well. The high injury network, the question of it changing over time is determined by the destinations where people are going to be going to. And this, again, is going to reflect the development processes within a particular town or city. And so it's not going to change all that much that it needs to be constantly reevaluated. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Any other comments or questions at this time? Seeing none. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Richard. And Richard, apologies for mispronouncing your last name. I'll try to do better in the future.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Next item is member items. Are there any items that come before the board? Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just given that we are canceling the August 6th meeting and the next one is August 20th, I just wanted to let folks know that MAPC will be working with the MBTA Advisory Board and MPO staff on putting together the materials for the next MPO municipal election process. We'll be getting those materials, the procedures, the ballot information out at the beginning of August. And I just wanted to let members know that the 4 seats that are up for election this year are the Southwest Advisory Planning seat, the swap seat that is currently held by the town of Rentham, the North Shore Task Force seat that is currently held by the city of Beverly, the at-large town seat that is currently held by the town of Brookline, and the at-large city seat that is currently held by the city of Everett. And again, we will be distributing those materials in the next several weeks, and we will make sure to have a reminder at the next MPO meeting as well. And if folks have any questions, you can always reach out to me individually, and I'm happy to set up a time to talk to anyone about that process. Any questions? Happy to discuss now or later.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm happy for the people going to London, but as for me, I'm really happy to be here at one of these MPO meetings. And if you, Mr. Chair, and Tegan go away, I don't know what I'll do. But seriously, no. And hopefully, I'm not going to step on anyone's toes. But Jen's coming after me, and she'll let me know if I stepped on her toes. But I am so much interested, in trying to get to the bottom of these issues that we're having with the tip, and the project selections and the money's available, mainly the money's available, and I'm really hoping that we can spend some time doing that. I know to a large extent the Tipper Committee is created for that, but I think it's a conversation to be really good to have with the whole board, especially because I'd like for you to be at those conversations with the chair because you're not at the Tipper meetings, because you have a lot of sway on the committee by virtue of being chair, but also because of your knowledge about what happens. What about the whole transportation network. And I think there's just like 5 questions that we really need to wrestle with. And I rattled through them in about 10 seconds. One is like, at what percentage of full cost do we put a project on a tip in its first year? 2, if it's less than 100%, at what point do we indicate the full costs and when do we account for them? 3, if a project runs behind schedule, what do we do? 4, if a project's cost increases, what do we do? And 5, do we give new projects a high priority for the first year, even if previously programmed projects are delayed? And I think if we can come to terms with those, we put ourselves in a really good position, for the next tip. And so if we have time at an upcoming meeting, maybe we could spend maybe 30 minutes or so, with the whole board just kind of hashing that out. And I'll bring this up at the Tipper meeting, but we come out of each of these cycles and I'm really kind of energized to let's get to the bottom of this. And the summertime, I know people go away, but it's at the time to do it because we come back in the fall and before you know it, we're in the next cycle. And so that's it, Mr. Chair. It's a request me for time to devote to this. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And Eric and I'll take it under advisement and figure out what we can do. And of course, Jen will talk to you before we make any decisions. And you're up next, Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Len. I didn't get my hand up early enough in the beginning of the meeting to note that I'm fairly certain we've locked down July 23rd from 1 to 2:30 as the next meeting of the TIP committee. Ethan, I believe, is going to send out an email about that shortly, so he'll correct me if I got any of that wrong. And Len, if you would be willing to send that list of questions, I'd love to take a look at them before the meeting too, and would love to work with you a little bit on thinking that through, as well as with the chair and vice chair. And the other thing I wanted to thank everyone for the notes in the chat. I've taken screenshots of everything to pass along about Louisa specifically. And I also just wanted to note that Christy Tarandazzi from the T has volunteered to, I guess, a friend of hers who also lost someone too soon said that a group of friends of the parents had collected letters that folks wrote about sharing memories, and that she's heard that the gags would welcome that. So she's collecting notes, and I believe the goal is to collect them by the 27th, which I is a Monday. Kirsty's also going to be at the vigil today. She says she'll be wearing a bright yellow floral dress and will likely have her very adorable dog Sully with her, pending air quality. So you could look for her or look for me if you have something by that time. But otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat and happy to make that connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Are there any other items at this time? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Lynn Diggins.
Diggins seconds of motion.
Without objection. Oh, I'm sorry. Does anybody object? Without objection, we are adjourned. And remember, no meeting in 2 weeks. We'll see you all in 4 weeks.